Do you have bumps on your scalp? Do they hurt? Is it bleeding, burning, itching? You may have scalp folliculitis.
I'm trying to share my horrible experience with folliculitis and acne on my scalp. That was nightmare for me for about 8 years. I tried every single thing. Okay, it's not very expensive. I tried everything, so let's try this one too.
Psoriasis is a skin condition that causes flaky patches of skin which can form scales. It's also important to mention that psoriasis is a long-lasting or chronic disease that usually involves periods when you have no symptoms or mild symptoms, then followed by periods when the symptoms are more severe or they flare up.
I do have hydrosol, so I just put some of that on my scalp, as well as Dermaid yesterday. I should really start trying to use some sort of special shampoo, but I do get the feeling that it's all either fungus or bacterial infection, and those motherfuckers have to die either way. So whatever I put in, anything's going to kill them. And I think getting rid of the thicket and constantly attacking this area with exfoliation, i.e. a razor blade, as it heals, I don't want to be fucking scratching those things open all the time, will help. Now, in terms of trying to line up this back area, I'm trying to figure out some sort of guard I can put over it. I could line up to prevent the razor blade from cutting into my good hairs. So if I could line this up and keep it sturdy, then that razor blade won't be able to get in there. I'm thinking a metal headband might be okay so long as it didn't slip. But what I really need is something the shape of my stencil that I can put down and it will just stay there. This will not be based on the curvature of the head, but rather the dimensions if it went through my head directly. So I will get that stencil now and I will measure it and I will draw something that can be made, that can be placed on my head and just stay like a ring in position with some firmness so that the razor blade can easily press down without having to worry about too much thickness there. But it needs to be strong and it has to conform to the shape of my head a bit. If not, it needs to be a ring that cannot warp. It needs to maintain, it can't warp or be stretchy. It has to sort of hold its position in a nice way on my scalp. If this fits perfectly, then why doesn't this? So I can see. So why isn't that equaling exactly the rest of the shave zone? If I put that right where the front of the hairline should be, why is that not working? Well, the thing is, I think it probably is. It's just that it's warped out of shape. Look at the air bubble. But the shape, when pressed down, is what I used to model my shave zone, and therefore this is the shape that needs to be internally cut out of here. Now this is my current scalp design. When I measure over the geodesic shape, just over 8 inches, I tried to make it 8. It ended up being 8.1 out of 8 because Americans use a base 8 number system. And then the maximum width across the top there is 7.5, as we see here. Let's see if I can trace it. It doesn't want to sit exactly flat, and it kind of warps when I do that as well. So I'm thinking maybe instead of tracing it, I will plot out the dot points, front, center. That's the outside. Yeah. Basically just traced it. I should have just traced it. I don't know why I didn't trace it. Should have just, because I felt like as I press down, it warps. See, it changes its dimensions. So these measurements are, say, 153. Okay, 170, 153. That will be basically a circle, and this bit will pinch in at the front. Let's see if this fits. I don't know how I got those measurements because it seems way off. One of the things I really wish this light would do would be raise and lower, but it can't. So I've printed this thing, which I kind of just guessed. It looks a bit wrong. If I try to make that line up, what I'm trying to do is create what I would normally do to put my fingers there so I can just shave there without shaving over my good hairs, but they've gone all the way back here now. So I was hoping that this thing would have enough flex in it that it would just become like a shaving limiter for the shave zone. It would be designed to just pull down over my head and make it so that if it was down taut, which it wouldn't be without being held there, which requires either hands or string, I guess. This is physiotherapy stretching band. This is really cutting off the blood supply to my brain. But this is really pulling down tight, that's for sure. You don't want this just pouring off as the razor blade's going back there. And now, ladies and gentlemen, for my next trick. What time is it? Let's just pretend I don't know. How many through what? It's quite all right. Let's check this out. Yeah, I know I'm bleeding on the back of my head. Thanks for telling me. Very uncomfortable. Very uncomfortable. Next design, I would round it off. Given that I know I just need this vague back and sides shape rather than, you know, just as a, it's more like a marker than a, I mean, it sort of is mostly my size, but it could definitely afford to have had rounded edges on the interior for my personal comfort. Wait a second. Aren't you supposed to be vacuuming this shit up? Yeah, feed me. You're my best friend. Wilson! Right. You need protrusion for this. Also, I don't want to store this in the bathroom unless it's hidden away somewhere. Hey, I just realized you probably shouldn't put glue on top of an open wound and just leave it sealed with plastic for 3 weeks. This folliculitis or psoriasis is not as pronounced. You can see why I had dandruff, right? This was all flaking heaps. I feel like I should spend another night without hair, just to give myself a chance to let this heal a bit. This experiment seems partially successful. Certainly not flexible, which is probably good. This is why I gave it lateral integrity. It doesn't fit by itself. You gotta pull it. You gotta pull it down. I was thinking, do I need holes drilled in it? No, you just need to flop material over the top of it like that. Then pull that down under your chin and then tie the other two bits together. I was thinking, for those of you who don't want to learn how to do 3D drawing and don't have a 3D printer and all that sort of stuff, you could potentially, and I just guessed that shape, I just put 2 circles that I thought were about the right size, whatever, and just put lines to connect them. That's what I ended up with. I was thinking, if you guys are comfortable putting cling wrap or saran wrap down over your head and taping all of that and tracing out your stencil, just extend the tape around. When you cut out your stencil, make sure all of it's reinforced with tape, right? Cut out that central part, make sure it comes beyond your forehead, like all the way over your forehead. Keep the tape coming down your forehead. When you cut out this bit, you can keep that as a stencil, sure. But this outside edge, hopefully, would be able to keep as long bits of saran or glad wrap or whatever, so that you can tie them onto your chin. That's where I got the idea for that from. And then you might have a successful shave zone stencil with already has handles. You just put it over your head every time. It'll fit because it's the exact inverse of your stencil, and that will now become a shave zone. In fact, anyone who ever uses that method to create a stencil should just simply cut it out carefully. Like, you start with a blade, continue the rest with scissors, and that way you will not have any wastage. It'll just be perfect. There might be a few little specks that are a bit sharp or whatever from the scissors and, you know, human error, but at the end of the day, you'll both have a stencil, which would be better than this stencil, because this stencil doesn't actually conform to the shape of my head at all. But it's just like a guide that I've been using. And you will also have a shave zone template, because it's the inverse of your template, of your hairpiece template. So for every time you make a hairpiece template, hopefully you can also cut out a shave zone template at the same time. And so long as you keep pulling it tight and you've got tape all over in all directions, don't do it over your eyes so you can't see what you're doing. But definitely do it down past your shave zone area. Keep the integrity there. Hopefully the whole thing will go thump over your whole head and just end up in a circle around your neck. Depends on how strong your tape is, I guess. Because I don't think that anybody's shave zone is going to be bigger than their heads. But it could, you know, if it went sideways, sort of stretch down or diagonally go through your face and end up around your neck. I don't know. This one certainly does not. It has no stretch to it whatsoever. I mean, I don't want to break it, but it's hard to warp. That's why I made it wide, but still narrow. Narrow so that the blade, this is 2 mils wide, and it's got a 20 millimeter, or sorry, this one's got a 10 millimeter. That's exactly 1 centimeter there, right? And that's exactly 2 millimeters. So that it can't really warp. It'll just, all you're really doing is you're having a hand placed there that you can't shave past. And when it's pulled down tight, there's no gap. And that's how I achieved that for this. Like, I could go back over that again with a razor blade, though with this cut on the back of my head, I'm sort of reluctant to do that. I would say, just from guessing, that when I do put this hairpiece on my head, it's going to be weirdly too high. And then I'll probably want to continue shaving maybe down further. I don't know yet. It's already so weird to me. This concept of doing this, it's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. So, the other thing is, this has been bleached to the front, but it's hard to tell because I never bleach it for so long that it becomes blonde. I just need it to remove the highly visible dark brown roots. So under a lot of lighting conditions, I can't see that this is much blonder than the other end. Once I've cut the hair, I can probably guess that the long part is the front and the back is back, but I cut my own hair, so that's pretty like bilaterally symmetrical. If I flip it, like, why wouldn't you say that that's the front and that's the back? It's so similar. The way I can do it at the moment is that the Lord haircut, when they cut off the lip part of the front, have done it in a more V-like contour than the rounded top part. So that's the only way I can tell, as well as the fact that they've done it really neatly. What I can't tell though is where the temples are. It's very unclear. I guess it starts here where I started doing messy cutting with the razor blade when I was doing the cut rip. And on this side as well, maybe. I don't know how I'm going to make it easier for myself to know what's the front and what's the back of each hairpiece. In terms of putting this on my head, which I'll do now just without any glue at all, I still haven't figured out whether I'll use tape or I don't have any tape, so I'm not using tape this time. But in the future, it looks like people are just putting tape, you know, willy-nilly around the edges without aiming, basically. Oh yeah, and I wasn't really paying close attention to how people were placing it on the head. I just flipped it onto my head. I think they might be flipping it onto the head like I just did. I think it might be different based on whether, maybe they just place it on the back of their head and just roll it forward without any glue on it because the glue's on the head or something like that. And they place it gently until it's time to press down. I think they differentiate between placing and pressing. Whereas for me, it's always been like, right, it's covered in glue, you've got 30 seconds, go, right? I think that's probably not the wisest way to do it, but their way is kind of fraught with danger as well because things can get caught and snared, and they were talking about having to troubleshoot problems like, you know, folds were developing and glue was getting stuck in places it shouldn't have been. It'll be interesting to see how this hairpiece crown hair direction works out. Which seems to be, I don't know. It's hard to now know at the moment since I brushed it and the hair's long and it's weighted. Hopefully it won't be a problem at all. I really hope it isn't. I'll probably put a pin on the top like I did for the cutting, and I would have to probably draw on a glue shape. As it stands right now, I do not intend to cut down further to match this because I need to know how the hair sits. The problem is the hair will sit differently once it reaches this point because it'll be sitting on top of these hairs. I can either cut some of this out, or I can cut some of this out, or I can just fucking forget it and just try it on. It wouldn't try it on means glue it down onto my scalp for the next 3 weeks, but I'm not going to leave it on for 3 weeks. I'm going to compare it to what it's like with my default natural greys and beard. Then I'm going to shave some of my beard, keep the beard in the greys. Then, depends on how I'm feeling, I'll either shave the beard off completely and keep the greys, because that's all still all natural if I do that, yeah. So no beard and greys. And then maybe just dye my hair and put it back on. I don't think I'll dye my hair with this on. It's too risky, I think. I did get these with the electric vacuum razor. I could potentially put it all up in these things and then just dye around the sides and then just jump in the shower like that maybe. At that point I won't be able to dye my beard, but it's rare that I would ever want to dye my beard, and probably the fumes for the hour, 45 minutes or whatever it is that this dye stays on your head for would be pretty toxic and make your eyes water a bit and burn your face maybe. Like red and grey, they're chasing you around. It's like a tag team in a comedy race. My red hair is heading towards auburn and it's just over the hill. I'm gonna go absolutely brown and get rid of all those reds, and I won't be like some little freckle-faced redhead kid anymore. And now finally the baton pass is going to Mr. Grey, who's taking it and just continuing towards the grave. I'll wait for this to bleed out a bit and then I'll sleep on it. So with that placed there right now, my hairline comes down to there, which is in a no-go zone. You don't want it stuck to your forehead. Don't think that, oh, you're going to change my hairline from when I was, no, naturally, because the sweat and the movement in the forehead is going to loosen this bit. And you sweat more in the forehead, I think, than the scalp, so there's about that much difference if I wanted to change the shape of this hairpiece, I think. But there is a third option, and that is potentially hairpieces of this size have enough flex in them to not require, I know they're stretching more, like I could stretch this out, but obviously stretch results in recoil eventually, so you shouldn't rely on stretch at all. Is that 1 centimetre? It's less than a centimetre, I'd say. It seemed like a lot more than a centimetre before. I think because of the pain in the ass that it is to cut this thing, it's not that bad when I stick it on the mannequin head though. Like if I shoved a pin in that, I could easily trim off a bit with scissors. But it was all about this tracing here. I wonder how my shave zone stencil goes with this. It just doesn't work at all. It has no benefit for that. Yeah, that was always going to be a protruding area, and if I push it forward like that, then that becomes the protruding area. Given that I've sort of mostly decided to keep the natural, that was an indecision that I had that I've now not got an indecision about. I really always wanted to not have to ever cut the front, just the back. So, since I've decided I will keep it, maybe I should simply trim this so that this fits better here. But any slight miscalculation will cause there to be a gap back here because it'll be too small on my shave zone. Yeah, I think I'm gonna put some more cream on this. If we examine the density of the stubble on my head, let's see if we can spot a balding pattern, if we can spot it at all. Can you see that there's less follicles in this area anywhere? That definitely looks like less follicles. In fact, that area there looks like no follicles. if I make this smaller, it eliminates the possibility that I could shave a bit more of this off. I'm not going to touch this. I'm going to leave this intact. Give my head a day to breathe and then stick it on tomorrow. I'm really tired, but I'll probably stay awake for another 10-15 hours, maybe 30 hours. I can't help it. I can't sleep. I'm fucking exhausted. And Stumpy's waiting for me.